1. Stone Age, rock, stick, repeat. Before guns, tanks, and tactical drone strikes, humans solved problems the old-fashioned way, by throwing rocks at each other until someone died or got bored. Welcome to Stone Age warfare, where strategy meant hit them before they hit you, and the deadliest weapon was a sharp rock and a bad attitude. We're talking way back, like 10+ years ago. Humans hadn't invented writing yet, but they had figured out how to beat each other senseless over territory, food, or the audacity of looking at someone the wrong way. There were no uniforms, no armies, no commanders shouting dramatic speeches, just tribes of early humans figuring out how to throw down with what they had. And what they had was not much. Weapons were basic, sharpened stones, wooden clubs, bone daggers. If it was heavy and vaguely sharp, it was considered battlefield ready. You didn't need a blacksmith, you needed a decent throwing arm and a strong immune system, because medical care consisted of walk it off or die quietly. Battles were small, chaotic, and deeply personal. These weren't wars, as we think of them more like extended family disagreements that ended in trauma. One tribe would ambush another over access to water, hunting grounds, or maybe because someone stole a goat. If you were lucky, your enemy tripped on a route mid-charge. If you were unlucky, you found out how quickly a rock to the skull could rearrange your weekend plans. Tactics? Loosely defined. The strategy was mostly yell loud, run fast, swing hard. Some groups used ambushes, hiding in bushes until it was time to leap out and start clubbing. Others preferred the blitzkrieg approach, which basically meant charging like maniacs and hoping for the best. And let's not forget the psychological warfare. Early humans painted themselves with mud, wore animal bones, or danced around fires screaming nonsense not for TikTok clout, but to scare the absolute hell out of their enemies. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes they got speared mid-scream. But for all the chaos, Stone Age warfare laid the foundation for everything to come. It introduced humanity to the concept of organized violence, territorial conflict, tribal loyalty, and the idea that whoever controls the most pointy sticks controls the valley. So yeah, no drones, no satellites, no chemical weapons, just one guy with a club and another guy with worse luck. Progress had to start somewhere. 2. Bronze Iron Age. Welcome to the stab era. Once humans got tired of throwing rocks and yelling, they did what any rational species would do. They learned to melt stuff. Thus began the glorious age of bronze, iron, and an absolute explosion of creative ways to stab people. The Bronze Age, c. 3300–1200 BCE, was the first time warfare started to resemble what you might recognize from movies: armies, weapons manufacturing, and entire cities being burned down because someone insulted a king. Bronze weapons were the hot new thing, literally. Swords, daggers, axes, spearhead saw, custom forged, all great at making sure your neighbors stopped breathing. Armies were small but organized, and by organized, I mean they could stand in a line without hitting each other accidentally. They had shields, maybe some armor if you were rich or important, and the beginnings of tactics, like flanking and don't run directly into spears. This was also the age of chariots. Nothing says rich guy on the battlefield like standing on a two-wheeled death cart being pulled by horses while flinging javelins at peasants. Chariots were the tanks of the Bronze Age, fast, flashy, and terrifying, until someone realized they'd tip over real easy on bumpy terrain. Then the Iron Age, c. 1200–500 BCE, came rolling in like a metal upgrade patch. Iron was stronger, more common, and made stabbing even more efficient. Suddenly, everyone had access to better weapons, and warfare scaled up. Empires like Assyria and Persia began professionalizing their armies because nothing says power like paying men to kill on your behalf. This is when formations like the phalanx emerged, tight-knit lines of spearmen with overlapping shields. Very intimidating, very pokey. The Greeks loved it. The Romans later took that and said, cool idea, let's add matching armor and stomp across half the world. Iron also made siege warfare go from try knocking on the gate really hard to let's build a 40-foot tower and roll it at the walls. Battering rams, catapults, and giant fire-launching contraptions started making cities sweat. Warfare in this era was messy, loud, and suddenly political. You didn't just fight because you were angry, you fought for kings, gods, resources, or to flex on your enemies. In short, the Bronze and Iron Ages were humanity's official upgrade, from screaming with clubs to strategically screaming in matching uniforms while holding metal. Efficiency was born. Morality, still on backorder. 3. Classical warfare, Greeks, Romans, and organized mayhem. If the Bronze and Iron Ages were the warm-up acts, the classical era was the headliner. Think ancient Greece, Rome, Persia, Carthage, those toga-wearing, empire-building, statue-loving civilizations who made war feel oddly professional. Let's start with the Greeks. They introduced the world to the phalanx, aka the don't break formation or we all die strategy. Hoplites Greek citizen soldiers lined up shoulder to shoulder, shields locked, spears pointed out like a meat grinder with sandals. It was teamwork meets PTSD. One guy panics and runs. Congrats, everyone dies. Sparta, in particular, took war personally. Boys were trained to fight from age 7. If you couldn't hold a sword by age 10, you were basically furniture. Spartans didn't do war, they were war. Their entire personality was six-pack abs and stabbing things in rhythm. Meanwhile, over in Persia, armies were bigger, fancier, and had more bling. Persian warfare was all about scale thousands of men, rows of archers, war elephants, and even some psychological warfare via luxurious robes. Imagine showing up to battle and your enemy is both shining and silent. Terrifying. Then come the Romans who looked at Greek warfare and said, let's do that, but more boring, and won. 0 times more effective. Roman legions were hyper-organized. Each soldier was trained to march, fight, and build a road all before lunch. They used short swords, gladius, for close combat and large rectangular shields to form the infamous testudo, or turtle formation. Cute name, terrifying function. Rome also perfected siege warfare. They'd build ramps, towers, even walls around your city while you were still in it. It was warfare as slow-motion domination. You didn't just lose to Rome, you were swallowed by it. And let's not forget naval warfare. The Greeks had triremes wooden ships with 3 rows of rowers and big metal rams on the front. Battles were water-based demolition derbies. The Romans took that idea and added planks to board enemy ships because, of course, they preferred punching to sailing. Warfare during the classical era became less fight to survive and more fight to expand your brand. Empires didn't just want to win, they wanted to conquer, tax, and rename your hometown after Caesar. So yeah, if the Stone Age was about survival, classical warfare was about domination with logistics. And sandals. Always the sandals. 4. Medieval mayhem. Knights, castles, and questionable hygiene. The Middle Ages where warfare got fancy, feudal, and unbelievably unhygienic. If you've ever imagined a knight in shining armor galloping toward glory, you're about 12% right. The rest is mud, plague, and the smell of a man who hasn't bathed since last harvest. Let's start with the basics. The feudal system. Kings owned everything, gave land to nobles, who hired knights, who led peasants into battle. It was like a pyramid scheme, but instead of Tupperware, you sold blood. Loyalty wasn't optional. If your lord said grab a sword, you were expected to grab that sword, your pitchfork, and whatever rusty helmet your cousin died in last winter. Enter the knight. These were the elite fighters mounted, armored, and dramatic. A proper knight was basically a walking tank. Chainmail, steel plates, and a helmet that cut peripheral vision to 0. They looked cool but fought slow. Picture 2 iron refrigerators slamming into each other at horse speed. That's a joust. But knights weren't the whole army. Most battles were a mix of poorly trained peasants, overconfident nobles, and archers who prayed the wind was feeling cooperative. The English longbow, for example, made a big impact, especially at battles like Agincourt, where a bunch of muddy yeomen turned French knights into pincushions. Siege warfare was the real medieval flex. Got a castle? Great. Now prepare for a months-long campout where the enemy surrounds you, cuts off your food, and occasionally lobs diseased corpses over the wall with a trebuchet. Yes, they weaponized dead people. Biological warfare was just flinging Jerry from accounting after he caught plague. And those castles? Fortresses of stone, moats, murder holes, actual term, and boiling oil. Defending one meant dumping hot things on invaders and praying your walls were thicker than their ladders. Offense meant building siege towers, digging tunnels, or just shouting at the gate until someone got tired. Religion also got involved because nothing spices up war like divine endorsement. The Crusades were basically centuries-long road trips to the Holy Land sponsored by popes, with plenty of looting, massacres, and the occasional misunderstanding over who was supposed to be holy. Warfare in the Middle Ages wasn't just about who had the most men, it was about land, loyalty, divine right, and how fast you could reload a crossbow without shooting your own foot. So yeah, knights looked epic in stories, but in real life, they were just armored dudes riding into muddy chaos, followed by 600 coughing farmers. 5. Gunpowder, cannons, colonial chaos, boom goes the world. Just when you thought warfare couldn't get any messier, humans invented gunpowder, a magical dust that turned swords into decorations and castles into very breakable suggestions. The first real boom happened in China, because of course it did. They invented gunpowder while trying to find an immortality potion, oops, and instead got the secret to exploding stuff forever. Initially, it was used for firecrackers, then fire lances, and eventually full-on rockets that screamed at you before exploding in your face. fun at parties, terrifying in combat. But the real gunpowder revolution hit when it made its way to Europe. Suddenly, armies were trading in bows for arquebuses, those early guns that took 20 seconds to reload and had a 40% chance of blowing up in your own hands. It was basically like flipping a coin. Heads, your enemy dies. Tails, so do your eyebrows. Enter the cannon. These things changed the whole castle game. All those thick stone walls built during the Middle Ages? Useless now. One good cannonball and your fancy fortress turned into gravel and regret. Sieges went from months of starving and trench digging to just aim the cannon and wait. And just like that, fortifications evolved. Castles turned into star forts, those weirdly pretty, geometry-inspired death traps with angled walls and room for lots of cannons pointing in every direction. Renaissance warfare was part battle, part math exam. This was also the age of colonialism, when European powers realized, hey, we can use all this new firepower to take other people's stuff. And take they did. The Spanish rolled into the Americas with horses, steel, and smallpox. The British turned redcoats and muskets into a full-on global brand. The Dutch, sea battles, spicy trade wars, and extreme capitalism with cannons. Warfare stopped being local. It went global. Whole continents were drawn into conflicts they didn't start often just because someone with a funny hat wanted sugar, tea, or glory. And don't forget the rise of standing armies. Before, soldiers were often part-time guys with pitchforks. Now, you got paid to fight all year round. Uniforms got snazzier. Drill routines became a thing. You stood in a line, fired your musket, and hoped your side reloaded faster. So yeah, the gunpowder era turned warfare into a loud, smoky, empire-building machine that left bullet holes in history and a very long list of, oops, we colonized that. 6. Industrial warfare. Trenches, mustard gas, misery. Ah yes, the industrial era when humans discovered machines, factories, and a brand new way to make war not just deadlier, but incomprehensibly depressing. If earlier warfare was brutal but heroic, industrial warfare was the part where the camera pans out and you realize nobody's winning. Let's start with World War I, the poster child for this disaster class. Thanks to the Industrial Revolution, every country now had factories capable of cranking out bullets, bombs, and bayonets faster than your uncle makes bad Facebook posts. Add in trains, mass mobilization, and nationalism, and boom, a global meat grinder powered by coal and confusion. Trench warfare became the standard because who doesn't want to live in a muddy ditch for weeks, surrounded by rats, rain, and the scent of your fallen comrades? Soldiers would dig deep into the earth, line up facing the enemy, who was also in a ditch, and then both sides would spend months firing, charging, dying, and retreating 5 feet. The phrase no man's land wasn't metaphorical, it was a real place filled with barbed wire, mines, and the lingering stench of poor decisions. Let's not forget the real star of the show, chemical weapons. Mustard gas made its battlefield debut, turning human lungs into biological soup. Chlorine and phosgene followed, ensuring that even breathing became a gamble. Gas masks were issued, but half the time they were late, broken, or just made you look like a panicked bug. Meanwhile, the machine gun completely redefined tactics. Charging in formation, great idea in 1805. In 1916, suicide mission. Soldiers were mowed down by the thousands in minutes. One push could cost 20 lives and move the front line literally nowhere. And when planes showed up, people got excited until they started dropping bombs. The air went from novelty to nightmare real quick. By World War II, Blitzkrieg had replaced slow-motion slaughter, tanks rolled like metal nightmares, and cities became firebombing targets. Total war meant everyone was involved: factories, women, children, entire economies. The battlefield was everywhere. The goal? Not just defeat the army break, the country. This was the era where we stopped glorifying war and started documenting just how awful it really was. Photographs, letters, battlefield poems, and trauma no one could unsee. In short, industrial warfare was what happened when humanity asked, what if we took all the worst parts of war and made them efficient? 7. Modern warfare, drones, data, endless desert fights. If industrial warfare was a brutal symphony of mud and machines, modern warfare is like watching someone play a violent video game while the rest of us argue about Wi-Fi access. War didn't stop, it just got weirdly clinical. Let's start with the basics. The Cold War. After World War II, the US and the Soviet Union stared at each other across the globe like two guys with nukes and very fragile egos. They never actually fought directly because, total planetary annihilation, but they absolutely fought through everyone else. Welcome to the golden age of proxy wars. Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan. World became a chessboard, and civilians were the pawns. Then came the digital age. Enter precision-guided missiles, satellites, smart bombs, and drumroll drones. Why risk a pilot when you can send a flying robot to do your bidding from 80 miles away? Push a button in Nevada, take out a truck in Yemen, be home for dinner. Warfare got remote controlled. But here's the plot twist. For all our futuristic tech, modern warfare is still very much boots on the ground. Just ask anyone who's ever been deployed to the Middle East. Endless desert skirmishes, urban combat, IEDs, ambushes. You've got night vision, armored Humvees, and top-tier gear, but you're still sweating in a war zone wondering why the locals hate everyone equally. The enemy? Not always in uniform. Modern warfare often involves asymmetrical warfare, where one side has tanks and jets, and the other has flip-flops, AK-47s, and an encyclopedic knowledge of local caves. Guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run raids, improvised bomb sits messy, personal, and frustratingly hard to win. Then there's the information war. Hacking, surveillance, cyber attacks. Countries now disable each other's infrastructure without firing a single bullet. Electricity, banking systems, even your memes aren't safe. It's like war meets Reddit, but way more expensive. Oh, and let's not forget media warfare, where controlling the narrative is half the battle. One side drops bombs, the other drops hashtags. Image is everything, and perception often more lethal than bullets. And yet, despite all this tech, wars still end the same way, with people displaced, buildings rubbleized, and politicians making vague promises while soldiers write emails home. Modern warfare is fast, global, and painfully impersonal. You don't even hear the jet before the missile hits. But make no mistake, it's still war, still terrifying, just now in 4K resolution. 8. Future warfare, AI, space lasers, the end of sanity. So we've stabbed, slashed, gassed, bombed, and drone zapped our way through history. Now comes the final boss, future warfare, where the battles are fought by algorithms, the soldiers are robots, and somewhere in space, a satellite is side-eyeing Earth like it's about to file for divorce. Let's start with the obvious, AI-powered warfare. You know, the thing every sci-fi movie has been screaming at us about for decades? Yeah, it's here. Militaries around the world are developing autonomous weapons machines that don't just take orders, they make decisions. It's like giving a Roomba the ability to target humans. Comforting, right? Imagine swarms of drones, communicating with each other, choosing targets based on facial recognition, and striking without a single human pressing go. That's not the plot of Black Mirror, it's a literal DARPA presentation. The future battlefield might not even need people, just lines of code and a kill switch, which hopefully isn't on Windows 95. And then there's space warfare. Once a Cold War fantasy, it's now a very real arms race. Countries are developing anti-satellite weapons, space lasers, yes, lasers, and orbital platforms capable of launching attacks from freaking orbit. It's Star Wars without the cool music or moral compass. But don't worry, Earth still has its own fun planned. Think cyber warfare on steroids, disabling entire cities, banking systems, power grids, and communication networks with a few keystrokes. Why bomb a city when you can just crash its economy, wipe its data, or leak everyone's search history? Oh, and biotech warfare is creeping in too. Designer viruses, gene editing bioweapons, and the kind of stuff that makes COVID look like a warm-up act. The next war might be fought with syringes, not bullets. And no, WebMD won't save you. Also, incoming exosuits. Because who doesn't want to cosplay as Iron Man, robot dogs with mounted guns, and quantum encryption battles that sound like a nerd's fever dream, but will decide real wars. We're basically 10 minutes from warfare becoming a video game no one agreed to play. So yeah, future warfare? Less brave men charging into battle, and more nations arguing through satellites and letting AI handle the dirty work. It'll be sleek, smart, and terrifyingly detached. The human element? Still there, just mostly in the crosshairs. And there you have it, 40. 0 years of human solving arguments in the dumbest, deadliest ways possible. From rock-throwing cavemen to space laser-wielding AI overlords, we've truly come full chaos. If this video didn't make you want to unsubscribe from humanity, go ahead and, like before the algorithm drafts you, subscribe before the drones get smart, and comment your favorite era of war, or which one you'd survive exactly 4 seconds in, looking at you, medieval peasants. This is Kim Jong History, signing off before someone weaponizes sarcasm. Catch you in the next historical disaster.